Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to
This is Nos Adietis. This episode of Nos Adietis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Adietis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A sideline fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ray Gibbs through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicola Dero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is going good!
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
And Porter says, cheated!
You want to win? This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
Welcome to another episode of Nos Adietis, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. We're recording on March 19th, 2024, and I am your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, friend of the show, Susie Rantz, and our engineer, Lickett. For about 60 minutes, the Sounders seemed to be well on their way to their first win of the season. It wasn't necessarily pretty, but they had a 1-0 lead and didn't seem to be in much danger of dropping it. But then Josh Atencio went and got himself red carded, and although the Sounders held on for another 25 minutes or so, they ultimately surrendered that lead. It was just the fourth time in 20 attempts that the Rapids had gotten any point in Seattle, and were left wondering when the Sounders can actually score from open play. Aaron, it's not a lot of fun right now, is it?
It is not on any level. The soccer is not very fun to watch. The Sounders are a team. They're built as a team, constructed as a team where the upside, when they're playing well, when they are scoring enough goals to win, where it can be kind of fun because you just don't feel, they're not going to blow the doors off of anybody, but you don't feel like they ever don't have the game in control.
Yeah.
When they're not scoring goals, it sucks really bad. And and they're not scoring goals right now. They haven't scored a goal from open play, as I think everyone knows. They haven't created a lot of dangerous chances. Like, this isn't like a situation where, like we've seen a lot in the past, where they're creating a lot of chances. The XG looks favorably at what they're doing, and they're just not getting it done in the final third. This is a team that looks completely bereft of ideas, and the few chances that they do manage to create, the finishing hasn't been there. And one of those problems is easier to fix than the other. If you get enough chances, generate enough chances, finishing percentages even out, right? Generating chances, figuring out how to do that is much harder, especially when the obvious answer is, well, you just get everybody healthy and back on the field, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. So it's not a lot of fun to watch. I'm still confident that this team at full strength is a team that can compete for a lot of trophies, but they're not going to be at full strength for at least 6 weeks, probably longer, I think is realistic to believe. And, they could be in a pretty deep hole by then. And that's for a season that I think had a lot of high expectations and a lot of promise. This is definitely not the way you want to start it off.
I think the most frustrating thing about this start is, on paper, it's not a very difficult schedule. They just had 2 home games against teams that you would expect them to beat. They had, the road game against LAFC was, that was always going to be tough. But then they have this game against San Jose, which is probably one of their more winnable road games on paper. And if they don't win this one, it does start to get a little tougher, even if they start getting more of their roster back. I wanted to focus in a little bit about this idea that they're not creating chances, and that's really, really true. And I want to say that, like, the struggles they're having right now are distinct from the struggles they had last year. They were top third in the league in terms of XG per shot last year. Right now, they're dead last, 0.06. Their average shot is basically a speculative shot that has very little chance of going in. Susie, what are you seeing in terms of their inability to create chances?
I think just like observationally, it does seem like they're doing a fairly decent job of like getting into good positions in the final
Yeah.
third. And it just seems like that final decision, whether it's cross, cut back, find someone at the top of the box, whatever it is, it's just they're not making the right choice. And I think you talked about that a little bit in your story this week, Jeremiah, from training, but I'm not sure why that is, because it's kind of like the same players who are making those decisions that were making them last year. So just something is off and not clicking in terms of decision making in the final third.
Yeah, it is fair, I think, to observe and to point out that they are missing not one or two players, but right now this last week they'd had 5 regular starters. There are 5 players you would assume would be starters who weren't available to start in that game. Albert Rusnak and Yamar did come off the bench, so that's good news. It looks like Steph Fry is going to be back this week. That's more good news. Although Steph Fry's absence really has been probably the least of their problems. Andrew Thomas has actually been pretty good. But at the same time, I think beating the Rapids at home, beating Austin FC at home, those should be the expectations, even when they're missing starters, even when they're missing, 5 starters. And I'm on some level, I'm willing to forgive the aesthetics of these early games because, okay, they're going to have to grind out results. That's sort of how it is, but they got to do the grinding part. And I think that's what was frustrating about the Rapids game is that they just were making dumb mistakes. They were doing things that just didn't feel like Sounders mistakes, like Josh Atencio's red card. I'll argue that there's a good chance that a experienced ref doesn't necessarily give him that card, but he shouldn't be putting himself in that position to allow himself to be kicked out of the game. The challenge that gets him kicked out is a totally unnecessary challenge where there's really not a lot of upside to him making that tackle. And when you're on a yellow card, you just can't afford to try to make that tackle, even if, I don't know, it's possible he won that ball, but he fouled the guy. There's no question at all that he fouled him. So it's just frustrating to see these mistakes getting made. Aaron, how would you deem your hope for this getting better?
You don't hear me?
No. Yeah, no, we hear you.
I can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
He's so stumped.
Yeah. It was such a hard-hitting question. Well, I'll ask you. Oh, we'll edit this, Susie. But Susie, I don't know, do you see any hope for this getting better?
I don't see hope like immediately on the horizon. I think it's possible. I think it's like it is something that is quite fixable, which is the good thing. I personally don't think it's just getting your ideal starting lineup back. I do think some of it is like as a team we have to come together and agree who do we want to be, how do we play, how do we make the right decisions, and I think they have the people who are capable of doing that. When I say like I don't necessarily see hope, it's just like I haven't seen enough of it on the field yet to be confident that they can do that.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you make of the decision to, so I'm of two minds on this, but I'll let you go first. They've been using a 4-4-2 for 2 of the 3 games that they played. They were prepared to use the 4-4-2 in the Union, or they did use the 4-4-2 in the Union game. Does it feel like that's the right call, or is it not? Or once we're talking about formations, it's sort of missing the forest through the trees?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems a little bit like they're still playing the same formation. They're just asking Raul to play a little bit differently. Like, to me, it doesn't seem like he's necessarily playing as a second striker. He does seem to try to be sort of being both a forward and play in that attacking midfield role. I personally would just like to see I don't know if it's going to work. But I would like to see them try different options. I would like to see what some of the bench players who haven't gotten a chance to feature yet. I don't know whether it's Tevez or Rothrock or whoever, but there's clearly a reason the coaches aren't choosing them, but I would just like to see if there's a different set of players, different positions, that could do what they want.
So, Aaron, is there a personnel or formation change that you feel like you'd like to see at this point?
I would like to see a personnel or formation change. I don't know if it's any one change. I think it's obvious that what's happening now isn't working. I think that the left side has been a real problem and the right side hasn't been much better. But I think that maybe three at the back. I don't want to discount Nuhu's defensive abilities. He's a huge asset there. But I think as a left back in this system, it's just not happening. He's getting a lot of the ball. This is a problem that has kind of been, I feel like, a recurring theme when the Sounders were having trouble creating chances, where teams just give Nuhu all the space in the world in the attacking third, and he ends up with the ball quite a bit, and he just doesn't do a lot with it because he's just not that much of an attacking threat. Leo Chu has done some good things, but he just feels so undependable to me. And it can be really frustrating to watch. I think moving Christian back to the center has to be on the table. I think moving Jordan out to the left has to be back on the table. I think moving Raul to the bench has to be on the table. I think all of these things have to be considered. The problems are so numerous, and it feels like everything is so holistically wrong with the attack that I can't even point at one thing and say this is the problem. There have been a lot of individual performances that have been encouraging. I think Jordan has looked good and he's made good runs and nobody's found him. I think Raul has looked a lot of the time like his old self, but he's being played, I don't want to say out of position, but he's being played in a position where he just hasn't really been able to affect the game that much. And they've got to figure something out, right? And I think Rusnak being back is going to help. And obviously whenever Joao Paulo is back, that's going to help as well. I mean, those are two really important creative players. And that is the problem to me right now, is the lack of creativity. So that's going to, right there, without any formational changes or tactical changes, I think they get better in that regard. But I think that there's value in figuring out how do we fix this specific problem that's happening right now with the players we have, rather than saying we just got to grind it out until these guys get back. Because they're, like you said earlier, Jeremiah, they're not grinding it out. If they were getting the results that they need to be getting, you could live with it, but they're not. And you need to have a plan B that you feel like can at least get you those hard-earned results. And right now it just doesn't feel like they do.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. And I think one of the things that I'm finding frustrating is I look at this sort of the way that this early part is going, and I feel bad because on one hand, I think Rui Diaz has probably been their best offensive player. I think he's done everything the Sounders have asked him to do, but he also feels like maybe that's one of the players who probably has to make way for this team to actually get better. Because as much as I appreciate the effort and as much as I appreciate him kind of flexing new skills, and he made something like 40 passes in this last game, something he had never, I'm pretty sure he set a career high for passes, but he also had like 0.03 expected assists. So it's not like he's generating a lot of chances while playing in that role. And like, I just don't know that he's the number 9 to lead the line. And I understand, I'm frustrated that Jordan hasn't looked more goal dangerous, but like you said, he is making good runs. And I think you kind of got to see what he looks like when there's functional playmaking. And that's just to me, that's the biggest issue is there's just no playmaking right now.
Yeah, Jordan is never, I don't think, ever going to be a lights out finisher. He's never going to be a clinical finisher or whatever it is that means. But he's a good enough finisher that if they are creating the number of chances from the runs that he's making that you would expect him to, I don't think it's a problem. I think he's probably got a couple of goals, and the Sounders probably have at least 4 more points. But they're just not. I mean, he's had one clear-cut chance this year, and it was probably not as clear-cut as a lot of people would say that it was. And it was also a really good save and a really tough angle. Other than that, he just hasn't had a lot of opportunities. And from what I've seen, I don't think that's a Jordan Morris problem. I think that's a nobody can find him problem. And when you look at the players that are on the field, I just don't know how shocking that is.
Yep. I will say one positive in this has been the emergence of Andrew Thomas as a perfectly capable and maybe even, I don't know. I don't think we're at the point yet where we're wondering if he should be starting over Steph Fry. But he's been really good. I've been really happy with, especially with his command of the penalty box. His passing, especially against Colorado, left a little bit to be desired. But maybe some extenuating circumstances there. But I've really liked what I've seen him as just his shot stopping. Obviously he saved the penalty, but he's looked confident. He's looked capable, and frankly, I'm looking forward to seeing him a bit more this year.
That save that he made on that free kick was pretty unreal and unfortunate that his team didn't help him out, because that was a really good save.
It was.
Yeah. I think if that ball doesn't go in, if the follow-up doesn't go in, he makes that save and the Sounders win that game. I think that whether or not it's a reasonable conversation to have, I think that the conversation of whether or not Andrew Thomas is Wally pipped Stephen Fry is happening most likely.
It would certainly be a topic of conversation, I think, even if it's not ultimately what the coaches are going to do. It was interesting the way that Brian answered that question when he was asked today about whether or not it's a goalkeeping controversy. And he basically said, well, it's kind of Steph's job to hand over or something along those lines, which I thought was kind of a funny way of answering that. But all right, well, that's probably, I don't know. I don't have a whole bunch else to say about this game other than I sure hope they start getting some wins, because talking about a team that's not scoring is about as boring as it gets. But we're going to come back after the break. We're going to talk to Susie about some other big news in both the Sounders and Reign world. And yeah, we'll dig into that a little bit. You're listening to No Sadietas. Welcome back to Nos Arietes. So some big news this what was it, Monday morning? The news came out Monday morning at the open of business in France. OL Group, which I guess that's still the name of the company, right? OL Group announced that they had entered into an agreement with a group that included the Sounders and the Carlyle firm, which is like I think a private equity group, to basically purchase OL or the Seattle Reign for $58 million, which all of a sudden seems like maybe that's a screaming deal based on the other prices that we're seeing. But Susie, this is very much in line with what we've been hearing rumors of, which has been reported by various places. What was your reaction to the news finally sort of coming out like this?
I think my reaction was like, thank goodness we have some sort of official confirmation that this thing is close, because it has felt close for 4 months now. Mm-hmm. So my reaction was mostly relief, like, oh gosh, we're almost there.
Yeah. And everything we've been, it's funny. I just the other day, like maybe Monday even. No, it must not have been Monday. It was over the weekend. I had reached out to the Sounders and just said, hey, or no, must have been last week. I reached out and asked if there was any reason we should be getting worried. And they basically said, there's no. this is still happening, is the indication that we got. But it is important to note this is not done. This still requires, like, MLS has to approve it. The NWSL still has to approve it. There's no real reason to think that it's not going to happen, but it is not literally done yet.
Yeah, I don't know if you've gotten clarity. I haven't necessarily gotten clarity on maybe what is taking longer for this deal versus other deals, but I think there's just like multiple factors, like the fact that MLS is involved and NWSL is involved. We're adding private equity, and like what is that like structure look
Mhm.
like in terms of private equity maybe putting up the financing, but another entity maybe being operationally owners.
Yeah.
So to me, it just seems like maybe they just need more time to figure out those details. But like you, we haven't heard anything but positive steps forward in this process. It's just been slower than expected.
Right. Yeah, I would echo that. And we still don't have a really clear picture like there's speculation as to how this is going to be structured, and really I've not been able to get really firm confirmation on how it's going to be structured. But what it seems to me is that it's going to be pretty similar to like the Seahawks Sounders relationship back when that started, which is the Seahawks didn't actually put up very much money to be part owners of the Sounders, but they essentially assumed all the business operations of the Sounders. I don't know if it's going to be quite that stark, but the at the time the Sounders didn't really have much staff, and so the PR staff essentially was being paid by the Seahawks. All the ticketing staff was being paid by the Seahawks. All the office people essentially were being paid by the Seahawks. And the Reign have a much more robust operation than the Sounders had when they launched. But I would imagine the Reign could do with some backup there. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've been super scrappy and they've grown their staff, like you mentioned. I feel like they're in a really solid place, but they could have probably more help with merch. They could have more help with ticketing. They could have more resources allocated to marketing. And if there's opportunities to do marketing where there's Sounders and Reign involved together, like having that joint functionality, I think will be really beneficial. Can they get better access to data analytics, those sorts of things where you can like more easily share across two organizations? I think that's all going to be a big improvement.
So from your perspective, though, how has the move to Lumen Field gone? Because I know one of the big things that kept the Sounders from getting more involved with the Reign was this sort of belief that, or an uncertainty around their stadium situation. Like that's always been sort of the big question mark around the Reign, is like, where are they going to play? And it seems like everyone has agreed that maybe Lumen Field does work, and the Reign have obviously at times done one, like 34,000 people who came out for Megan Rapinoe's farewell game, and that was amazing. And when they can get 20,000 people in there, it's really an amazing facility. But from you're going there on a much more regular basis than I am. What's been your sense of what is, how Lumen Field has been as a home for the Reign?
I think just in terms of like a step up for experience for the players, I know that for fans, there's lots of different experiences, but you cannot discount just how much better it is for the players to play at Lumen Field than Cheney or Memorial. Just locker rooms, like all of those things that just feel super professional. And a nice pitch. People can talk about turf, but it's quality, new this year, so we'll see how that goes. But I think that it's been I actually really love the atmosphere at Lumen Field, even if it's just one side of the stadium for a lot of the matches. they do a really good job with, I mean, Lumen has really good acoustics, and I think they just do a really good job with acoustics, where it feels loud. It feels like more than that when there's big moments. And I think that they've always seen this as like a steady growth opportunity. They didn't expect numbers to come overnight. And honestly, I think everyone can applaud and celebrate the fact that they aren't called OL Reign anymore, because hearing Seattle Reign is just like, and it's just much more of an immediate connector for the community. And I think it'll be, I wouldn't discount actually like how much of a big deal that can make.
Well, the merch was a huge upgrade at the very least. I mean, I think they look spectacular. The new kits, the new crest, all their stuff they're coming out with so far, I think looks like a huge upgrade. And that I would like to think that will have some real impact in terms of the way that the team is perceived and the way that the team is accepted. I feel kind of like cheating a little bit, because every time I've gone to a Reign game, it's been for a reasonably well attended game. So I don't think I've been to a game there where there's been less than 7,000 or 8,000 people. And I agree with you, even if there's, it's not full by any stretch of the imagination, but it's that side of the stadium is usually pretty tightly packed, and it feels like an event. And sure, it doesn't, I don't love looking across the stadium to see empty seats, but you turn your head either way and all the seats are filled. It's, I don't know. I think it works as a home venue. And I got to imagine that was a big part of what ultimately convinced the Sounders to get involved with the team.
I think so. I think they'd also be pretty, frankly, stupid to not see what's happening in women's soccer
Right.
and the growth of it, and believe that there's real potential here. I think back in 2019, which is, the sale to OL Group happened in December of 2019. We were coming off of a pretty historic World Cup that felt like it was the start of tilting the needle for women's soccer, but maybe didn't feel like enough to convince someone that you could go from Cheney to Lumen really naturally. And then obviously the pandemic hit and halted a lot of things. But I think that you could have seen back in 2019 maybe that this is where it would have been, but it would have been much more of a risk than it is now.
So one of the things that I don't think is avoidable is you look at, you mentioned the OL Group bought the Reign for what, $4 million or something
It was a value of like 3.8. Yeah.
In 2019, and 58 million is what the price is now. So it's like 1,000% increase, or is that right? 1,000, it's something like that, right? It's some outrage. Yeah, I think it's 1,050%. I think is the number I saw, is which over 40 years, which seems crazy. And what's even crazier is that seems like it might be a good deal. Right now, San Diego Wave are apparently going to sell for $110 million. Where is this valuation, this increase in valuation coming from?
That one's wild to me, because that did really feel like it was out of the blue. Like the Thorns just wrapped up a couple of months ago and sold for what was then an NWSL record of 63 million.
Okay.
And the Thorns right now, before this new ownership, they were training at Providence Park, which now they're separate entities from the Timbers. So to be valued at 63 million with like some of the uncertainty around training facilities even is pretty massive for them. And Bay FC paid 50 something million as an expansion team, which is also pretty enormous. But to go from all of that to 113 million was I don't know. It's pretty wild. The whole San Diego Wave thing is a little shocking to everybody, I think, just because it did feel like it came out of nowhere.
And then Angel City apparently is also potentially up for sale, or that's a little bit more of a complicated situation, right?
They have like the highest valuation of any club right now, just by like Sportico's valuation because of all the sponsorships that they have. And so, yeah, but they haven't put a number behind that one.
What was and I guess the domino that started all of this was Michelle Kang coming in and saying offering to buy the Washington Spirit for 25 million or something, right?
I think it was 35 million, and everyone
Okay.
thought it was, I think, I can't remember, but everyone at that time was like, this is too much. And turns out it was actually right about pretty accurate for the
Right.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been pretty amazing. I would imagine you're right. Like that's a huge part of why the Sounders are probably dying to get involved in this organization at this point. Is it's a rocket. It feels like it's a rocket ship, frankly.
I mean, I feel like the TV deal was like a 400% increase in value from their previous TV deal. So like everything around women's soccer is growing at just such an enormous pace that the value of clubs is only bound to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, exciting time to be covering and to be watching women's professional soccer in this country. And on that note, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on was to talk about a podcast that you're getting ready to put out on our feed. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I'm inspired by you because I really like sound bites that you do. I think they're like, I'll be the first to admit, like, I'm not a like day-to-day podcast listener. It's a little too much for me, but you give like little bite-sized snacks for us. And it's fun to listen to on the bus ride. Despite the growth that we just talked about in women's soccer, there's not a lot of folks that are like day to day covering the rain. In fact, I would argue it's us.
Right. Yeah.
To give this as another option for folks, because I know a lot of people do consume podcasts. So we're going to be launching something called Rainbow Reflections, which will be very similar, kind of following matches, big news, just little bite-sized nuggets of rain content for folks. And hopefully people like it. And I'd love to hear what people think when it does come out.
Yeah. No, I think it's one of the things that I wanted to do is increase sort of our rain footprint on this podcast feed. So thanks for doing that, Susie. I'm excited to be giving it a platform and have Ride of the Valkyries continuing to do great work. So thank you for that, Susie. And thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And with that, I will sign off for our thanks to our sponsor, Full Pull Wines, as well as all of our subscribers, which I will remind you can still become a subscriber to Sounder at Heart, Ride of the Valkyries, No Saudi at this, all that stuff for just $27.50, and that includes sales tax now. It's such a funny number, but the things we have to do to satisfy Washington State sometimes is just wonderful. But with all that said, I am Jeremiah Oshan, signing off for Aaron Campo and Susie Rantz. This is No Saudi at this, and remember, you will never get alone.
We love you. Let's win another one.